Welcome to the first episode of the Dog Pound Daily Podcast. I am site co-expert Steven Kibitza. Joining me today is site contributor Andrew Siped. Andrew, I know it's February, but you are very excited to talk Browns football.
Oh, I'm wearing a Browns jersey right now, Steven. It's
now whose jersey are you wearing right now?
This is number 98 out of Baylor University, Phil Taylor.
All right, well, I got my
falling on some hard times in the NFL.
Hey, you got to stay loyal. Jerseys are expensive. I got my Braylon Edwards jersey, as you know, is a go-to of mine. Yeah. Tucked away, probably wear it a few times during the winter just to keep in that football
I have
mindset.
A William Green jersey for my dad. I have a Travis Prentice jersey.
Oh, my.
I think I have the Brady Quinn one still at home. Maybe that'll turn into a Garoppolo jersey, though.
No, I'm glad you said Jimmy Garoppolo. What a transition. So you are... Let's dive right in. You are very high on getting Jimmy Garoppolo for the right price. Obviously, you don't want Garoppolo for the number one overall pick. I don't think anyone wants that. Mm-hmm. Let's talk. So for you, Browns have number 12 overall pick and the number 33 overall pick. For you, would you give up the 12th overall pick for him?
Steven, I think I would. It just really comes down to the position itself and the quarterback position. In the NFL, you're really nothing without it. And I'm not saying that Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe that he could be a good quarterback in the NFL. If the Browns feel that he's their guy, then I don't think they should let number 12 get in the way of letting them get their guy. I think essentially it's house money right now.
I think I get the argument. I agree that, if you find someone you like, to give him a chance. But think last year, was RG3 their guy, or do you think it was kind of a double, hey, front office is saying, well, let's not invest too much in trying, a franchise quarterback. Let's just give this guy a chance. And Hugh Jackson just made the best of it because they were not trying to win last year.
Yeah, I think part of it was the organization took a look at itself, and after all those veterans had gone, and maybe even up until they traded away number 2, I think they just kind of automatically were going to try and accumulate as many assets as possible. And RG3 was kind of that bridge quarterback that they wanted, but obviously didn't get.
I don't think RG3 really stood a chance. The team wasn't, very well constructed. And it's not really anyone's fault. They really came in and blew it up to build toward the future. But it was clear in the games he did play, he's not the guy. So with Garoppolo, I do agree with that. The 12th overall pick, if you can get your guy, and I know we and you have spoken, off the podcast about this, Jimmy Garoppolo was a high prospect when he came out. This is not a similar situation to a Matt Castle or a Ryan Mallett where it's just a Brady backup or, even a Belichick system. He's a high prospect who, if he went to another team and it wasn't behind, one of the top QBs of all time, he probably could have been playing already.
Yeah, and I think it kind of works to his advantage because even Kyle Shanahan came out and said that when he was with the Browns, he really liked Garoppolo coming out. And like you mentioned, Ryan Mallett, Matt Castle, all those previous Patriot examples, none of those quarterbacks were ever rated that high or drafted that high for that matter. So it's really just a matter of what setting Jimmy Garoppolo as a separate example. Each case is different. So what does Jimmy Garoppolo bring to the table that those other quarterbacks didn't?
Exactly, and it's the easy argument against Garoppolo, and it seems like most Browns fans, well, I'd say all Browns fans, they have an idea of what the team should do. It's no different than any other sport. But with the Browns, the quarterback position, because it's so unstable, everyone has an idea, and if you don't like a certain guy, you're going to find reasons to go against him.
And I think part of that just stems from even Tim Couch. I know a lot of Browns fans, maybe like myself, I don't really I remember having a Tim Couch jersey, but I don't really remember too much of how bad they truly were back
then. Yeah, we should clarify. So for any listeners, me and Andrew are post-1999 Browns fans, not in the sense where we just discovered the team, but we were very young when they left. And for us, the post-99 Browns are all we have, which it's a little sad.
Butch Davis was I remember the first coach that really I remember like being cognizant of the Browns and being a big fan at that point. So just seeing kind of how that Tim Couch experiment failed in a lot of people's eyes, being on an expansion team like that, it kind of sours a lot of Browns fans on pulling the trigger on those top quarterbacks.
And that's just really quick, the Tim Couch thing, so unfair to get mad at it. Look at David Carr. It's you put guys in these impossible situations. I know that the Jaguars, where they started, I believe Mark Brunell took them to the playoffs in their second or third year.
Well, they had Fred Taylor
in the '90s,
which
and
helps.
that's a rare situation. Drafting a quarterback into an expansion team, you can't blame. And
it doesn't work.
I mean, he did break his leg in that playoff year, but he got him to the position to be in the playoffs. And it's weird that people look upon that era of the new Browns coming back. It's so negative. That was their best stretch of football since they've been back.
They went to the playoffs, and people criticize like that time, 1990, that 99 draft was the last time the Browns have really attempted to build their franchise around a quarterback. And when you look at the Browns recently, I mean, the constant turnover and the different coaching staffs that comes in, you fail to retain your own talent, and you're not drafting guys that are good. You're just setting yourself up to fail. And none of the okay, you hear the argument, let's build the team first. You can't build the team if you don't have any direction. Do you understand? A quarterback, just having a guy under center that you think can win you games is going to give you
in
direction.
Football, you need to have a quarterback. You can't just get lucky and make, because you're not going to win a Super Bowl that way. You can get to the playoffs without a good quarterback, but it's going to be a Texan situation where Brock Osweiler this year and Hoyer last year are just whipping the ball around to the defense.
So this year, if there was one team that you could automatically write off to not win the Super Bowl, who was it? Automatically.
Well, let's say a team in the playoffs.
It was the Houston Texans.
Yeah, the other teams, there were a few guys missing quarterbacks.
I mean, if you had, let's say Oakland had Derek Carr, they're a Super Bowl contender because Derek Carr is that good. And so I see a lot of the arguments against Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, he was a late second round draft pick. Why would you give up a first round to get him, or why would you give up more value than he was drafted at? And it's you're looking at what the potential is that you've seen on the field. If Derek Carr was a late second or maybe an early second round pick, if I knew Derek Carr was going to be this good in that draft, I would have taken him number 1 overall in that 2014.
And that's the problem with drafts, and it happens in fantasy drafts too. People say, oh, you're reaching, and saying, no, I'm getting the best person who I think is the best player. And there's a difference. If you draft, say you go like the Buccaneers, and you draft a kicker in the second round or whatever, if you know that no one's going to take a player for 5 rounds, that's different. But if this is a guy who's someone like the Steelers or the Patriots are going to snag at the end of the first round like they do every single year, you just take him early and you say, it doesn't matter what his rating is according to Mel Kiper or Todd McShay. It matters that they know he's the best player available, and you take him. If it's a guy within that round, like with a Derek Carr, at that Johnny Manziel selection, that's easy to take Derek Carr right there. But not.
Yeah. Look at Corey Coleman last year. I mean, no one thought the Browns were going to take Corey Coleman at 15. I think when I was watching the draft, he wasn't even on my radar. I think it was I think Treadwell was available, Josh Doxson, and I forget who else maybe we were considering at that time. But they said Corey Coleman. I said, oh, okay. I mean, he was the best wide receiver in college football, but that's just something that if they think he's the best receiver on the board, then good. I mean, I can't disagree.
Exactly. So back to Garoppolo for the Browns, and it's obviously a time of rumors. That's just the time of year it is. With any sport, the offseason, you're going to get a lot of trade rumors and all this. So Texans might be looking into Garoppolo, the Bears. Obviously, the Browns are connected. Do you think that the Browns are going to get caught up in that sense of, we need to get Garoppolo and trade the 12th pick? Because there's likely Bill Belichick would give up, say, hey, let's just take their second round pick, because if no one's going to give him a first round pick, he wants Brady there for 3 to 5 more years.
Yeah, I think it really depends on if there's any teams in between the Browns pick at number 12 and the Browns pick at 33. So I think the Texans are a huge player. And if they are willing to cough up their their first round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo, I think that's when the market pushes, and it's on the Browns to decide whether or not they can pull the trigger with their number 12 overall pick. I don't think San Francisco or Chicago's going to pull the trigger at number 2 or 3. I think so, and I don't think the Browns are obviously going to do it with number 1. So it really depends on what teams are for real on Jimmy Garoppolo.
It would be tough to see a second or third overall pick going. That'd be insane for any player. I mean, at that point in the draft, you got your pick of prospects there. Just trading for Garoppolo wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I think I wrote this earlier. I think it came out on Wednesday or Thursday. I forget what day of the week it came out, but I wrote an article on people thinking that you need to build the team first, and one thing that people fail to realize is that you need to build around a quarterback to start. You need to find ways to draft talent without having that glaring need at quarterback. So you look at a team like Dallas, and people are like, oh, well, they found a quarterback and they had already built the line and built the entire roster already, and then just dropped Dak Prescott in. He was ready to go. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, you had Tony Romo there for the last 7-8 years, or however long he's been there, that they didn't have any question marks there. They were always confident in Tony Romo and his ability to lead the team, and so they were able to draft linemen in the first round and not quarterbacks. They were able to go after free agent cornerbacks and defensive players to bolster their roster. You look at a team like the Browns, if you keep trying to move forward with a quarterback like RG3 and try to develop talent around them, if you don't have capable quarterback play, you're not going to develop other players on the roster.
Yeah, the build the line argument is something. I mean, you can't argue with the general concept of that argument. The Browns don't have the strongest offensive line, but they also don't have the worst. And not having the worst doesn't mean you have to stay content and not go after the linemen. Say you got guys in the draft, but the Browns have pieces on the roster that they could put in different slots to have a capable offensive line next season without having to spend a first-round pick. And that argument, I think, stems from, so as with any sports team, there's the more, and I don't really like these labels, like the more casual fans and people who say they're diehard fans, but I like to make the distinction of people who just watch on Sunday and people who kind of keep track of the roster moves and, all offseason kind of keeping up with the scouting. There's no problem with either one, but I think sometimes the people who just watch on Sunday kind of make an agenda by saying like, oh, look at this play. This guy was bad. And what's his name? Oh, I don't know. It's just the guy, the right tackle. Well, maybe it's Pastor out there. Maybe Sean Coleman's out there for a few plays. And it's like, or it's Robert Griffin running into the defensive lineman saying, oh, the line stinks. Well, as most football fans know, there's so much going on in every single play that the coaches can pick it out and say, this is where the assignment was blown. But you can't just blame everything on the offensive line. It just doesn't make sense. And I think that argument comes from that, or it's like someone will have a clip of poor Cam Irving getting bowled over because he's too big to play center. And it's just not a way to build an argument.
Yeah. How many times did we watch RG3 hang onto the ball for 10 seconds longer than he should have and then end up either running out of bounds or just sliding in the backfield, which is considered a sack? I'm not saying that all of them were like that, but just put a quarterback back there that does exactly what Jimmy does based on his small sample size, which is complete the ball, 68% accurate, doesn't turn
just
the ball over.
Get rid of the ball before
moves the football.
They get back there.
Yeah. He can go through his progressions, find out where, based on what the defense is giving him, and find out where he's going to complete the pass. If you can do that, you can turn it around so quickly. Look at what Jacksonville did. Jacksonville had drafted Blake Bortles number 3 in 2014. They had a decent year, but got pieces in Allen Robinson, Malik Jackson. That was this year. But they got some talent on that team, and Blake Bortles had 30? He had 35 touchdowns.
I don't know the exact number, but he had a very solid, productive year.
He had a crazy year. And they were that next up-and-coming team. They're like, oh, you can put some more pieces in there on defense. You can that team could be a playoff team. And look what happened. Bortles regressed, and that team did exactly that. You're not going to have very few cases do you see a defense carry a team. I mean, you have
the Broncos.
Bears, 2000 Ravens. Even the Broncos, in 2015, that would be definitely the most recent example. I just don't see... If you don't have a
and to be fair with the Broncos, they still had one of the smartest quarterbacks in NFL history, even though his arm was,
Exactly.
made of rubber at that point. That intelligence helps. That's why, like Osweiler was complaining, like, look, man, we have one of the most, it's like an old point guard in the NBA. Like, the timing may not be there, but the intelligence is there. He's going to figure it out. And so I want to get back to Garoppolo really quick, because we kind of touched on some of the points, against him. There's the don't want to trade draft picks. There's the fear of losing on the first round pick, and a lot of people don't like it just because it's Patriots backups, or just the history of Patriots backups.
I don't mean to cut you off, but that one in general, I feel like Browns fans, they've turned, because we've been so bad, the team has been so bad for so long, that they feel that they've turned the draft into the Super Bowl, and these draft picks have turned into almost invaluable assets that they can't trade. That everyone is so obsessed.
And there's so many misses on them too, which is crazy.
Obsessed with the potential, or who can we get? What rookies like? I mean, just a few times can we do exactly what we did with Jamie Collins? Find those players that are maybe coming towards the end of their rookie deals, that are maybe a little bit unhappy with their current situation. Find teams that are willing to unload those established, talented players, and maybe give up an early third round, late second round. Even, I mean, if it comes to it for a quarterback that you think is a franchise guy that you need to pull the trigger on, give up a first rounder. It's a difference between a prospect and an established talent.
Yeah, and that mindset of Browns fans just always, valuing that's kind of an extension of the way the front office has been run for a while. Because you always have new people in, so fans are scared, I think, of losing those picks. Say, hey, you have a front office come in, whiff on like 5 picks, then the new one, it's like these guys cannot blow this.
I mean, so every team in the NFL in a normal draft gets 1 first-round pick, and the Browns this year are the only team that has 2. So they're not, if they trade that 12th pick for Jimmy Garoppolo, and
do the Titans also have 2 really quick? I believe they may have 2.
Oh, they might. You're right, because they got the no. Yes. No, they're 5.
Regardless.
Keep the Browns. Yeah. I mean, that second pick, like I said before, is house money. I mean, you can turn that pick. If you could turn that pick into a franchise quarterback, that's the whole reason why you do the Carson Wentz deal. If you don't think Carson Wentz is your guy, trade out of there, get these assets. What are you going to use those assets for? It's the perfect time. I'm not saying. And while I say this, I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo is the franchise savior. If there's a guy that is your franchise quarterback, do it. You can't hold back on that.
And I like you brought that point up, the whole franchise quarterback thing. Let's just clarify. There's about 10 guys at any given time in the entire world that are capable of being star quarterbacks. And the key with a team like the Browns is to find a guy. You don't need to find the next Aaron Rodgers. You need to find a guy who can just play solid at the position, because there's always this thought that, we need to find, and a lot of the, fans who have been, older fans, we need to find the next Bernie Kosar. There's just not a lot of guys like that coming out. And like the best example, the thing now is, there's no Andrew Luck in this draft. Andrew Luck style prospects come around every 10, 15 years, and how many pan out?
Exactly. So, I mean, to be fair, there are first-round quarterbacks that have been given time to develop and actually succeeded. So, even looking at Alex Smith, I know for the first 7 years he was pretty bad, but he's a top 15 quarterback.
And look at Aaron Rodgers; he didn't even play for years.
Exactly. And how many? Okay, Matt Stafford, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, all 3 number 1 overall picks, all 3 given chances to be the guy, and all 3 are succeeding, in my opinion. Andrew Luck.
He has a tough situation. That's a bad organization.
That whole argument. There's no Andrew Luck in this draft. Well, Andrew Luck is not really Andrew Luck, right? The Andrew Luck everyone
he could
thought
be if he left
3
Indianapolis, maybe, but that's a bad situation.
That GM, that was a bad drafting ever since they got him. And
the point you're making though is
Chris Ballard can turn that around.
It's always this hype. It's there's no Andrew Luck, but even Andrew Luck, I know the Colts have a very rough organization. Hopefully it turns around because they have a lot of talent there. He hasn't won a Super Bowl, And
we just need a quarterback that is talented enough to develop around.
yeah, where you don't have to take one every
and
year.
again,
Just a guy who say, okay, he's our
Exactly.
starter this year, and if we go 0-16 and he stays healthy, and he doesn't look like RG3, we're going to start him again next year. Because someone like RG3 did so bad, you can't start him 16 games,
Yeah.
and he probably wouldn't stay healthy anyway. But you just need to get a guy, say, like you brought up the Jags with Bortles, and just say, hey, whatever happens, he's our starter, because the only way for us to get better is to just give – and every quarterback you bring in might not be the guy. And if the Browns are going to be a sub-500 team for the next 2 to 3 years, you don't need to keep on this quarterback train every year. Just bring a guy in and say, hey – and if you're 7-9, let's say – I don't think they will be, but let's say next year they go 7-9, just as an example. Let's say they go 7-9 with Garoppolo, just for the sake of this conversation. That doesn't mean that he needs to be the guy we're not going to sign him to an 8-year deal. But he's a guy who could say, oh, we'll start him again next year. And if, say, they regress, they go 6-10 or 5-11 or whatever, you can still start him again the next year.
The only problem with your argument is that when he signs that deal,
No, that's the problem.
Money. But the good thing is that a lot of these quarterback deals now are a lot built on incentives.
Except Osweiler's.
Which is smart. I mean, you have the Tannehill, Andy Dalton.
Well, that was just a bad deal
I don't know, but
for the team.
Yeah, just to be able to take a quarterback. I don't care if you take him at 12, if you think it's Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, if you think it's trading for Jimmy Garoppolo at 12, even if you think, and this is, I thought about this the other day, and do kind of like what the Vikings did a few years ago and trade back into the first and get a guy like Patrick Mahomes and sign maybe a bridge quarterback. Until you give him time to develop, like if he's not good his first year, give him a second year and give him a third year to make your final decision. Because during that time, you've given your team direction. You're building around. You're able to draft and develop talent that you've either already had on the roster or finding through the draft and just finding that chemistry that so many Browns teams have lost.
And given Jimmy Haslam has learned his lesson, which I think he has, he's not going to fire these guys no matter what happens.
You think
let's say this year they go 2-14.
I think
or like 3-13. I don't think he'd blow it up yet because it's only been 2 years. I'm sure the NFL, or the other owners might be like, look, you need to relax. But if he keeps the same group in place, I believe there is a new mindset because, they got Dave Podesta in there and people get mad, oh, he's in baseball, but it's a philosophy of, and there was an article that went up on Dawg Pound Daily recently, and it was our one of our contributors, Joel Cade, wrote about how we're kind of in a baseball style rebuild right now, where they know, hey, we're probably not going to be good for a bit. We just need to stick to this plan, and these guys know this. And no, it's not like when Mike Holmgren came in and was like, oh, don't call me when you want playoff tickets. Like, no, these guys are saying, hey, we know we're not good, but we're going to build for several years, given we don't get fired, and we have a good coach in place.
Yeah, and that's kind of where what I mentioned before with the trading for draft picks and established talent. If you take a look at what even the Indians did, if you want to reference the baseball building, they took what was a prospect, an unknown commodity. Yeah, Clint Frazier has a lot of potential, but they don't know what he could be, and rest in peace, Andy Marte, and be that quad A. Ryan Garco, Matt Laporta never fully develop, but they took that chance and turned him into Andrew Miller, who's who's the reason why they made it to the World Series.
Exactly.
And I mean, you can look at the Cavs trading what everyone who knew was going to be really good in Andrew Wiggins for a known commodity in Kevin Love, and he's the reason why they're able to compete for championships every year. When I wrote the article about time and patience being the keys to the rebuild, that doesn't mean that they can't use draft picks to find those players. It's not deviating from sticking to the plan and developing players. It's just helping accelerate that process a little bit.
So you have to treat everyone on the roster the same, like you'd run a business. Say, hey, we have our current players and we have our draft picks. And you just have to you treat it like, hey, well, we're going to trade this draft pick because it's an asset.
It's an asset. That's exactly
they do it in
what
baseball all the time. Say, oh, we're just going to we're throwing these guys in. it sounds crazy, but you have to treat them almost like they're not real life individuals. Like in Moneyball, in the movie, he just cuts a guy one day before he gets his MLB tenure, and you say, sorry. It's horrible, and that it depends how you want to run your team or run your business. But if you want to be successful, sometimes you have to do that.
A lot of people give him crap for bringing in a baseball guy and not making sense. But I mean, look at some of the strategies that baseball teams have employed. Look at Houston Astros, the Cardinals for the longest times have had some of the best farm systems in baseball. And the Cubs coming back using their farm system, the Indians doing the same thing. All of these teams are making these blockbuster trade deals for young established talent that's like with their unknown commodities. So where the Browns continue to acquire that draft capital, I think that's real. At least what I'm hoping is that's truly their end game, is to find those kind of players that can be building blocks for when the rebuild is reaching its playoff point.
Yeah, because you don't want to be rebuilding for 3 years in football, because in baseball you could rebuild for 10 years because you have a farm system. There's no farm system.
Well, and also there's no quarterback in baseball. You can have different position players that contribute in every way, but with the NFL, the quarterback is the most important position regardless. And that's why people, when the mock draft started to come out, even when Deshaun Watson had won the title game and people thought he was gonna go number one, I don't blame them, because if say everyone goes through the combine and it comes out that everyone loves Deshaun Watson, he's the surefire number one pick, you know what? Take him over Myles Garrett, because you can find another pass rusher at 12 or in the second. You can find those guys, but until you have a quarterback, you have nothing.
And so let's move back, kind of talking to, let's say, the current Browns quarterback. So obviously Josh McCown, no longer a member of the team. Kind of saw that coming. That was a Ray Farmer deal. McCown, very helpful to the young quarterbacks, but at this point, there was no point in keeping him. So now on the roster, you have Kessler, Griffin, and Hogan. And Hogan, you can kind of take him out of the conversation because he's not in,
Can he go back on the practice squad, or is it?
Well, I believe he's still on the just regular roster now, because they don't have to make any. They don't have to break the roster down to 53 for a while.
No, I mean, can he go back on?
So let's say take him out of the equation, Griffin and Kessler. Mm-hmm. I think we both agree that Griffin has no chance of starting. But what
he has a chance if every single quarterback.
I guess he could start because Cody Kessler started week 3 this year. But so let's say with Kessler, do you think there's any chance that they just roll with him in 2017? Because this time of year is filled with talk every year about quarterbacks. I remember this time last year, I was writing articles every week on Goff or Wentz. And it turns out they took Corey Coleman.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of Cody Kessler. I think he gets unfairly pegged as that career backup quarterback.
He's only played 1 year.
I mean, I think Cody Kessler did exactly what you needed him to do as a rookie third round quarterback. I think the Browns were so bad on offense
and defense as well.
And Hugh Jackson, I don't think Hugh Jackson did him any favors either by abandoning the run. But I mean, you look at those games against Miami, Washington, and Tennessee. That was some of the most positive, exciting.
And they should have won
football.
That Miami game, which was his first start.
They were in all 3 of those games until, I mean, maybe Tennessee a little bit different because they were down, but they had a fourth quarter comeback that was kind of derailed by Hugh Jackson calling that 2-point conversion at first instead of second. But either way, it's still a competitive game that we were so desperate for in the last 6 weeks of the year.
People forget he was thrown in. Kessler was. He was a third string quarterback, and he had the start week 3. And as we need to discuss, quarterback is a very difficult position. And when Robert Griffin III is taking all the first team reps, and McCown's taking second team reps, Kessler, his week 3, that week leading up to the game, that was like his training camp. It's like, all right. And he had to prep for a Dolphins team who started the year a little. They had a bad stretch to start the year, but they ended up being a playoff team. And he led them to a near victory, a missed field goal, derailed that. Mm-hmm. But he played well, and he got let's see, he got, I know, knocked out of 2 games and benched during 1 game. So in really 5 full starts, he never had a horrible game.
And I think part of the argument depends on, because with both Kessler and Garoppolo, they faced that Dolphins team back-to-back weeks. So you could either make the argument that both Garoppolo and Kessler are capable quarterbacks, or that the Dolphins defense was truly that bad for the first 2-3 weeks of the year. In terms of Cody Kessler, I mean, I think they need to draft a quarterback, and if they do that instead of taking the bridge veteran quarterback route, if they just want to build around Cody Kessler for the next 2-3 years, if they think he's that guy, go ahead. I think if he, with more development in his downfield game, and I don't know how that particularly works, if that's a feasible thing to do, but if he can develop some long accuracy, I think he could do exactly what you need.
People are writing him off already. We can't throw downfield. He was just thrust out onto the field, and his receivers, he did have Pryor, and Coleman was out for most of Kessler's starts, but you have Pryor who's just learning the position, and then you had 4 rookies. I know not all 4 were usually played at the same time, but you had Andrew Hawkins, but you had a very inexperienced receiving core, and Cody Kessler couldn't throw the ball downfield. There was never a situation like in New York where you have an Odell Beckham streaking wide open down the field. Never.
Yeah,
with him and the quarterback.
And plus, I watched a lot of Kessler. Actually, every snap of Kessler's game footage in those 3 games, and just looking at the offensive line, I know that's when Cam Irving was center was a huge question mark. They had 2 or 3 different centers.
Because Irving bruised his lung week 2.
I'm not trying to give excuses for the guy, but we talk about how bad the offensive line was during certain stretches of the year, and that truly was a time when that was happening. So. I think if they truly want to give Kessler a look with a young rookie that they bring in, I'd be totally fine with that.
It goes back to what you're saying of if they think this is their guy. Because in past teams, let's say, there's rumors about this, and Kyle Shanahan kind of talked about his time with the Browns when he was down at the Super Bowl. It didn't seem like Johnny Manziel was their guy a few years ago, and it was just ownership wanted him or whatever the case was. It wasn't a guy who the coaches believed in, and they get this guy, and they have to play him. And if you take a guy like Derek Carr, who is just a good person compared to Manziel and good quarterback, and they want to work with him, and it's not fair to say, Hugh Jackson would never get a quarterback and be like, I don't like this guy. He can talk up the worst quarterback in the league to make fans think he's going to be great, but if you get a guy who he believes in, he knows he can work with them well, and it makes it so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Look at Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago when Hugh Jackson was the offensive coordinator?
Yes, he broke his thumb. Yeah.
And granted, they've lost pieces since then, but he almost beat Denver with A.J. McCarron. I mean, I think if you give Hugh Jackson the right quarterback, he's going to do things that make this team successful. And so while I think there's a ton of different quarterback options, and based on experience, I picked Garoppolo as the best option to accelerate that process. Just get a guy that's going to win you football games. I know,
and it was tough after this year. So, the Browns have been 3-13 followed by 1-15. Kind of gets you in this mindset that this team is always only winning that many games. But they've been able to win 7 with Hoyer and Manziel. Mostly Hoyer during that stretch.
Well,
10 with Derek Anderson. And you don't need to go find a star to win 6-7 football games. A normal team can have a bad quarterback and an okay everyone else around him and still win 5, 6, 7 games. Mm-hmm. It's like a bad baseball team. You can still win 70 games.
It still comes back to, even if you look at 2014, the last time we truly had capable quarterback play, Hoyer, the Browns drafted Johnny Manziel after getting Brian Hoyer, and it was kind of like, okay.
In the first round, too.
Brian Hoyer's playing really well. Yeah, Brian Hoyer's playing really well, and now you've got half the fan base itching to put in Manziel, plus the front office and the coaches want to play Hoyer, and no one's on the same page. No one gave Manziel, not to say Manziel would have been an answer, but no one gave him a fair shake. I would have almost preferred to be terrible and cut Brian Hoyer and just roll with Johnny than to go through a quarterback battle and divide a locker room and possibly a coaching staff, front office. Those are the kind of things that.
Yeah, and it's
the
tough with
Browns need to stray
Manziel
away from.
because he was just an idiot. So it's you have to kind of take the name off and say, oh, just any
didn't
first.
help
If
his
you
case.
draft a guy in the first round, roll with them because it's first round quarterback. Give him a few years, and I agree with that. But it's tough with Manziel because it was
look at-
him. But
Vikings did it with Bridgewater. I mean, Tampa Bay, Tennessee, Jacksonville. I mean, don't you almost kind of feel this, at least after last year, after that 3-13 year, wasn't the feeling was just terrible. I mean, Joe Thomas was talking about how much, like almost him being on the way out, and then you have a worse year in 1-15, and it's almost a little bit more positive because they've hit the reset button so hard that they've got all these assets and all this money to really to have a good attempt at finally fielding a winner.
yeah, I don't know. It's tough after a 1-15 year to be optimistic. But I agree with what you've been saying and sticking with the quarterback. And Garoppolo is just the reason everyone's talking about him is because the Browns are connected to him. But Jimmy Garoppolo could be anyone.
It's
It could be any quarterback they're looking at saying, even like a
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor, hey.
Matt Flynn was a guy,
Exactly.
same thing. And these are bad examples. And I just think that Jimmy Garoppolo is an overall better prospect than all of those past quarterbacks. But it's a desperation of teams in the NFL. I mean, like I've been saying, if you don't have a quarterback, if you have three quarterbacks, you have none. That's the same. So the Browns have RG3, Cody Kessler, Kevin Hogan. They got none. Until you have a guy that you're gonna go to war with and try and build a playoff team around, you got nothing.
Yeah, who knows? That's the fun of the offseason. Obviously, a trade likely would say they do end up trading for Garoppolo. It likely wouldn't happen until draft day because you have to keep your options open.
Oh no, it would happen well before draft.
You
day.
think so?
It would happen on March 9th or 10th, whenever that first day is, easily. Because during all that time, can't they start working? I mean, the new league year starts. You can start working.
Yeah, I just mean sometimes draft day trades. They just field offers for.
Yeah, but I think if you can nail down your quarterback on the first day of free agency, not only do you not have to go after a free agent quarterback, but you can take pretty much every quarterback off your board. I mean, you're basically
and
just
you're
trying to
focusing
find
on
out
every
which
other position.
players- Yeah, I mean, you've got your guy, so that's where it helps the Browns almost to get him that early because you help your own draft strategy.
I guess.
Because if you look at, I mean, the Browns don't have to draft a quarterback, so San Francisco has to draft one. Maybe Chicago has to draft one. I mean, they don't come back around. The Browns have two picks before.
Hey, the Browns did it
any
last
of
year.
those teams
Didn't
come
work
back
out,
around.
but no, I get the mindset. You get him as early as possible and get him in camp, get him in Berea working out. Hopefully, he does a little better than last
Be
year.
the best looking guy in Berea. I'll tell you that.
All right, so I guess we could say you're more on the Garoppolo train than I am, but I'm just on the let's get anyone who they believe in who can come in.
Yeah, I'm on that train too. If they think, and I just personally like Jimmy Garoppolo. If they go ahead, it's not like if they get Tyrod Taylor or something, I'm going to be like pissed off. It's more of just whatever guy they believe in, fine, and then we'll figure out in 2-3 years if they're able to keep. And this is where this plan kind of falls apart, is you can go 2-3 years down the line, and it's on Jimmy Haslam to say, do we have the right coaches in place, and is it the quarterback that's the missing piece versus the other way around?
Yeah, it's like I've been saying, it's so hard. It's fun to talk about. It's just difficult. So kind of wrapping up here, let me ask you one final question. Mm-hmm. If the Browns get Garoppolo, what is their record going to be in 2017? So let's get this on the record right now.
Interesting. All right. So there's a lot of who do we draft at 1 and 12?
Let's say they get Garrett number 1, and for conversation's sake,
Okay.
they get Leonard Fournette at 12.
Oh, if they get Myles Garrett and Leonard Fournette and Jimmy Garoppolo, the Browns, I think they win over 8 games. I think they win 8 games.
8 games? All right, that's on the record.
Just those 3 guys.
I'm going to go 4.
4.
4 wins.
I mean, just taking a look at what, and this is based on kind of those are two of the players in the draft that I think are going to be some of the best in this class, just the two impact players. If they come out and are as good as advertised, then the Browns are going to be sitting pretty for a while.
All right, you heard it here. Andrew Sipe believes
Jimmy Garoppolo
8 wins if the Browns get Garoppolo.
If Garoppolo sucks, even if Garoppolo sucks, the two guys that you drafted at 1 and 12 are going to be there for a long time. So that would excite me a lot.
All right, you got my optimism going here in February. Well, yeah, cool. That's our first episode. We have established that Jimmy Garoppolo is the next savior of the Browns, and he's going to lead them to 8 wins. So yeah, be sure to check out Dog Pound Daily. I know we got a lot of draft stuff going up at all times. Got a lot of mock drafts. Got a lot of different draft philosophy posts. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Our personal Twitter handles are on this video graphic, which you may have noticed already so far. And yeah, we're very excited to talk Browns football leading up to the draft. And once the draft happens, oh my, we can shift our focus.
Yeah, tweet at us questions. I mean, read some of our articles. Let us know what you think. And I mean, I'm always open for educated discussion, so bring it up.
Perfect. All right, Andrew, thank you very much. And thank you all for listening.